The night air in rural Georgia was thick with the smell of damp earth and burning wood, the kind of smell that clings to your clothes long after you leave. A single lantern swayed gently on the porch of a plantation house, its yellow light trembling against the darkness as if it already sensed that something irreversible was about to happen. Inside, a woman screamed, not the dramatic scream of stories and novels, but the raw, animal sound of a body breaking itself open to bring new life into the world. Footsteps rushed across wooden floors, a door creaked, and somewhere in the shadows stood a midwife, her hands already stained with blood, her heart pounding not with fear, but with an idea. You see, birth has always been treated as sacred. Even in 1850 Georgia, where human beings were bought and sold like tools, birth still carried a strange kind of reverence. For a brief moment, everything stopped. Even the most powerful men waited outside the door, silent and helpless. And that is exactly why what happened next could only happen in that room, in that hour, beneath that flickering lantern. Now imagine this for a moment. 20 babies, 20 fragile, crying lives born within weeks of each other on neighboring plantations. Some born to white women whose children would inherit land, wealth, and names carved into courthouse walls. Others born to enslaved black women whose children would inherit nothing but chains, cotton fields, and the weight of someone else's boots pressing into their backs. On paper, their lives were already decided. Two completely different worlds, no overlap, no mercy. But there was a problem. Or maybe, depending on how you look at it, an opportunity. Her name was Miss Eleanor Finch. Most people simply called her Nell. She was a midwife, not trained in any university, but shaped by years of whispered lessons, watching other women's hands, memorizing the rhythm of contractions, learning the smell of danger when a birth went wrong. She was white, unmarried, and in her late 40s, which in that era meant she was nearly invisible. People trusted her deeply, but they rarely truly saw her. And that, as it turned out, was her greatest power. Nell moved freely between worlds that almost never touched. One night she knelt beside silk sheets in a grand plantation bedroom, soothing a mistress with gentle words. The next night, she crouched on a dirt floor in a slave cabin, holding the hand of a black woman who had been worked until the very day her labor began. Nell heard everything. She saw everything. The casual cruelty, the casual lies, the way a white child's first cry was celebrated with champagne, while a black child's cry was barely acknowledged before the mother was pushed back to work. And slowly something inside her began to crack. Years earlier, Nell had lost a child of her own, a baby girl who never survived her first winter. After that loss, Nell stopped believing in fairness. She stopped believing in God's careful plan, or in the idea that people always ended up where they were meant to be. She believed only in chance and in choices. The first swap was not planned, that matters. It wasn't some carefully written scheme, it happened in panic. 2 babies were born on the same night, same storm, same hour, one white, one black. The white baby was small and dangerously weak, his skin pale as candle wax. The black baby was strong, furious even, screaming at the world the moment she arrived. When Nell wrapped them both, she felt something twist deep in her chest. In her mind, she saw 2 futures split apart like diverging roads, one wide and paved with comfort, the other muddy, violent, and deadly. And Nell hesitated, just for a moment, just long enough to ask a question she would never stop asking herself. What if blood wasn't destiny? She switched the blankets. That was it. That was how it began. No speeches, no weapons. Just a woman standing alone, making a choice no one would ever forgive her for if they knew. The white family never noticed. They saw darker skin and blamed a distant ancestor. People believe whatever protects their comfort. The black mother, she noticed. Of course she did. Mothers always know. But Nell leaned close and whispered words that would echo through generations. Let her live, she said. Let her live free inside a cage she doesn't know is there yet. The woman cried silently, her tears soaking into the dirt floor. Because in 1850 Georgia, you didn't argue with white women. You survived them. You might think Nell would stop there. That one secret would haunt her enough to make her careful, to make her quit. But humans are strange. Once you cross a line, it becomes easier to cross it again. And again. Over the next 3 years, Nell swapped 20 babies. Sometimes it happened in chaos. Storms, sickness, exhaustion, multiple births at once. Other times it was deliberate and precise. Nell learned patterns. She learned which white families barely looked at their newborns beyond counting fingers and toes. She learned which enslaved mothers were watched less closely. She learned how to bend stories, how to control timing, how to use people's assumptions against them. White heirs were raised black, given new names, taught to bow their heads, step aside, swallow anger. They learned how to read danger in a man's eyes, how to survive in a world that did not see them as human. Meanwhile, black children grew up in big houses, wearing clean clothes, learning letters, being told they were special, destined for more. But there was a problem. Secrets do not stay silent forever. They breathe, they move, they wait. Let me tell you about Samuel. Samuel was born on a plantation outside Macon. He grew up believing he was enslaved, though something always felt wrong. His skin was lighter than the others. His hair curled differently. The overseer beat him like the rest, but sometimes paused, confused, as if his eyes were lying to him. Samuel learned to keep his head down. He learned to work twice as hard and speak half as much. At night, Samuel dreamed of places he had never seen. Wide rooms, bookshelves, a woman humming softly as she brushed his hair. The dreams were so vivid they hurt when he woke up. He assumed everyone dreamed like that. Across the county, a boy named Thomas lived in a white household. He was sharp and curious, always asking questions. Too many questions. His parents worried, neighbors whispered. He didn't look quite like. But money and power have a way of silencing doubt. Thomas went to school. He learned to read and write. He learned he was better than others, though something inside him resisted that lesson like a splinter beneath the skin. This is where everything began to unravel. Nell grew old. Her hands shook. Her memory slipped. And guilt, real guilt, finally caught her. On her deathbed, she asked for pen and paper. Her handwriting trembled. Ink bled across the page. Names, dates, places, 20 entries. 20 lives quietly detonated onto paper. She never sent the letter. Years later, a woman cleaning Nell's old house found it hidden beneath a loose floorboard. She couldn't read, but she knew enough to know it mattered. The truth spread slowly, like rot beneath wood. A whisper here, a rumor there. By the time the Civil War ended and slavery was abolished, some of the swap children were already grown. Some had families. Some carried scars no truth could heal. Imagine discovering your entire life was built on a lie, that your suffering was not inevitable, that the comfort you enjoyed belonged to someone else, or worse, that the chains you wore were never meant for you, but wore you anyway. Some people refused to believe it. Others collapsed beneath its weight. Families tore themselves apart arguing over blood and belonging. A few brave souls sought each other out, staring into faces that mirrored their own, searching for something familiar in strangers. Samuel learned the truth late in life. He sat quietly, hands folded, listening as the letter was read aloud. When it ended, he nodded once and said, "I figured." No anger, no tears, just a tired understanding. He had lived his life as a black man in America. And that, he said, mattered more than any piece of paper. Thomas did not survive the truth. He drank himself into an early grave, unable to reconcile the privilege he had lived with the reality of where he came from. And that is the heart of this story. It is not about a clever midwife. It is not about a shocking secret. It is about how thin the lines are between us, how much of what we call destiny is really just circumstance. A blanket, a name, a room you are born into. Nell Finch believed she was playing God, or maybe fighting him, but what she truly did was expose a truth America still struggles with. That race, power, and worth are stories we tell ourselves, enforced by violence and maintained by silence. Those 20 babies grew into adults who carried that experiment in their bones. Some survived, some thrived, some broke. All of them proved something deeply uncomfortable, that if you strip away the labels, the chains, and the laws, what remains is terrifyingly simple. We are far more alike than the world ever wanted us to believe, and maybe that is why this story was buried for so long. Because once you truly sit with it, once you imagine those lives crossing in the dark, it becomes impossible to pretend that suffering is deserved, or that privilege is earned by blood alone. History is not just something that happened. It breathes, it whispers, and it still asks us a question. If a single decision made in the shadows can change so many lives, Then what responsibility do we carry, standing here, in the light? And that question lingers long after the lantern goes out.